Hello guys, welcome back to this amazing YouTube channel. This is a tech-based channel where we share various IT information that will uplift our IT careers. So if you're new here, karibu sana. Remember to check on my previous videos. Please watch them if you haven't already. And please subscribe, share the videos, and like the video. So my name is Lona and I'm a planning and evolution engineer. And as a planning and evolution engineer, I touch on various aspects of IT. So one of the things that I've talked about in my videos here are things to do with cloud computing. I've talked about containers, DevOps, network administration, system administration, and sometimes we also encourage one another on different issues like, getting started with your first entry level interview, or how to get certifications, or how to pass certifications. So please subscribe to this channel and help it to grow. So today in this video, I just to talk about network policies in Kubernetes. So if you're new to Kubernetes, remember I have videos already talking about how to get started with Kubernetes. So I gave an overview of the things that you need to know for you to get started with Kubernetes, and then I also proceeded to talk about some very crucial things that can help you as a Kubernetes administrator. I talked about very important resources like the pod, deployment, stateful sets, and daemon sets in Kubernetes. And then I also went ahead in another video to talk about services in Kubernetes. So services helps in exposing the applications running within the Kubernetes cluster. So exposing it either within the cluster or outside the cluster. So if you're new to Kubernetes, please watch those three videos. The first one being how to get started with Kubernetes. The other one is understanding what a pod is, what a deployment is, what a stateful set is, and what a daemon set is. And then the other one is understanding what services in Kubernetes is. And then now you can come to this one where we're talking about network policies in Kubernetes. So when we talk about network policies in Kubernetes, this is some kind of a firewall when it comes to administering Kubernetes. It's a way of controlling traffic coming in and out of your Kubernetes cluster, and specifically going to the ports. Remember, the ports are the ones that run applications in Kubernetes. So how to control traffic getting into those ports. In and out of those ports, we use what we call network policies. So before you even start working with network policies in Kubernetes, you need to understand two important things. And number one is that network policies are actually namespaced. So if you've been working with Kubernetes, then you understand what namespaces are. So namespaces give some kind of organization within your Kubernetes cluster by putting ports in some logical spaces, so that you can have ports in a certain namespace, certain logical space, and other ports in a certain logical space. So without network policies, remember, by default, there's no control of traffic within the Kubernetes cluster. So once you feel like you want to control traffic going into your ports or coming out of your ports, then you use network policies. So number two, network policies are supported by CNIs, that's container network interfaces. But remember, there are CNIs which don't support network policies. So if you want to use network policies, or you want to practice Kubernetes network policies, remember to use a CNI that supports network policies. So an example of a CNI that supports network policy is Weave. Another one is Calico. But the likes of Flannel does not support network policies. Remember, Flannel, I've seen Flannel is mostly used especially by people learning Kubernetes for the first time. But remember, it doesn't support network policies. So if you go ahead and create network policies using CNI like Flannel, they won't have any effect because that CNI does not support network policies. So those are the two things that you really need to put in mind when you're working with network policies. So one, I've said network policies are namespaced. They must belong to a certain namespace. And number two, remember to use a CNI that support network policies. So let's go ahead and write a YAML file for a network policy. So when you want to implement a network policy, remember you write an YAML file, and then you create that network policy using that YAML file. And remember, I've said it is namespaced. So because we are controlling traffic coming to specific ports, then the same namespace for those ports is the same namespace that you're going to put your network policy in, because remember, you want to impact those ports in that particular namespace. And because network policies are namespace, then that's the same namespace that you are going to use. So if you had ports in a namespace called test, then put your network policy in that namespace as well. So let's go ahead and start writing the manifest for this. So API version, it's networking .k8s .io/version1. Let me write this properly. It's small n. And then the kind, definitely it's a network policy. And then you give it some metadata. So one of the things you can provide, there is a name. So let's just use something like NP to stand for network policy. And then something that you must provide, I've said, is a namespace. So let's say you had a namespace called test that has the ports that you want to control traffic for. So you put the network policy in the same namespace. Then you provide some specs. So one of the specs that you have to provide, of course, is the port selector. So we need to select the ports that we want to control traffic for in this namespace called test. So if you had ports that you had labeled something, and those are the same ports that you want to control traffic for, so let's provide that label over there for those ports. So port selector. So we match the label. So maybe you had named them or labeled them as my ports, anything. Then the next thing you need to provide is the policy type. So here we have traffic for incoming and the traffic for outgoing. So if you want to control both traffic, then you need to provide both ingress and egress. So for policy types, here we have two options, egress. You can start with incoming and then the outgoing egress. And then you come and specify the rules for each of them. So you can start with the incoming traffic. So for the incoming traffic, you can control traffic from 3 different sources. For example, maybe a network, a specific network. Maybe you want traffic coming from a specific network to reach your ports. Number 2, you probably want traffic from another namespace to come to this port in this other namespace. And number 3, you want specific ports to reach these ports in this namespace. So let's start with the network. So you must say from, because this is the incoming. So if it's a network, you provide the IP block here. From the IP block, and then provide the block CIDR. Let's assume it's 10.maybe 0.0.0/24. This is like now you want traffic from all of these networks to reach your ports in this namespace. Or you want to exclude maybe a certain network within this, maybe a certain IP within this network. You use the word except, and then you exclude the IP that you want to exclude. Maybe it's 10.0.0.0, maybe .5. Yeah. /24, something like that. So that is for the traffic coming from a specific network. So another way is to control traffic or to allow traffic coming from a specific namespace. So under from, so instead of now saying IP block, then we say from a namespace. So we use namespace selector. Now we want traffic coming from a certain namespace to reach our ports. So we need to match a label for that namespace. So maybe you had a label for your namespace called maybe you are doing a certain project for test or anything, test 1, or I don't know, whichever label that you have. So that's another way of ensuring that the traffic from this namespace can reach this port in this other namespace. Another way is for the ports. So you do port selector so that you have other ports outside this namespace and you want to allow them to reach your ports. So you say port selector and then you also match labels, and then something like you had my port test, anything that you had used to label. So that is it for the incoming traffic. For ingress, these are some of the rules that you can provide. So we've seen how to provide allow traffic from a specific network and how to exclude some IPs, and then how to allow traffic from some namespaces, and also how to allow traffic from other ports. So that is for ingress. And then if there are ports involved, then you need to provide them. So you can say ports, can provide the protocol, which could be TCP, and then now the port number, maybe, I don't know, anything, just guessing any port number. So that's for incoming traffic. And then for outgoing traffic, most of the time we don't limit the outgoing traffic, but if you must, if there's a reason for that, then you also provide egress. And then instead of saying from, then this should be to. So maybe you want to limit traffic going out from that from those port in that namespace to a certain network. So you also just provide, just the way you did for the incoming, you also provide the IP block for that, CIDR, then you give your block, and then you can exclude if you want, and then also if there are ports involved, you do the same. Okay, but in most cases, I've said we don't usually limit traffic going out. So if you want to allow all traffic going out, you can remove all this and just say egress, and then you use these curly braces. So that one will allow all the traffic going out of your ports instead of just limiting to a certain destination. Yeah, so this is it for the network policy. So the most important thing to remember is that I've said, remember it's namespaced, and the namespace corresponds to the namespace for the port that you want to control traffic for. And also another thing is that there are specific container network interfaces that don't support network policy. So you must be very careful when you're implementing network policy, just to make sure that the CNI that you're using supports network policy. And then another thing is that, when you're controlling your traffic or rather regulating your traffic coming into a cluster, you have ingress and egress. So mostly we regulate the incoming traffic, which is egress, and you may want to limit traffic coming from a certain network, as we've seen here, or traffic coming from a specific namespace within the cluster or some other ports within the cluster. And then for outgoing traffic, you can still do the same. Instead of to, you say from. But in most cases, because we usually allow all the traffic going out, just use these curly braces. So I hope this has been informative enough, and I hope that it will help you in your journey in Kubernetes administration. So that is it for the network policies. The next one we are going to look at what we call probes. What are probes in Kubernetes cluster? So watch out for that video, and in the meantime, kindly continue subscribing and continue supporting this channel. So, and remember, I've said, for anything that you feel like I've missed out or I didn't say as expected, kindly let me know in the comment section. Let's interact and let's share this information. So bye for now, and let's meet in the next video. Goodbye.